Hello everybody and welcome to another video on bot building for beginners. Today we're going to talk about web views and I'm going to split this into two videos. I'm going to make quite a simple video to start off with. I'm going to make it a little bit more complicated in video number 2 and show you how to do some interesting interactions. Right, so what are web views? I think there's a lot of confusion around it. I think people think it's really complicated. It's not. Basically, Messenger and your chatbot allows you to open a sort of standard web view, so a web page. So you can load that inside Messenger. So essentially what it does, if you've ever heard of iframes, it brings up your web page or the web page you want in an iframe inside the Messenger chat experience. So this lets you offer different sort of features like which might be difficult to make with chatbots, such as like picking products or showing maybe some posts from your WordPress site, booking seats or choosing dates. So in terms of when you should use it, you probably use it for like longer interactions so rather than just sort of simple answering questions or quick replies, where people want to alter lots of different data, perhaps preferences, something like that. Especially like visual content, that works really well in a web view, and use any of these sort of combinations to bring that data back into your chats. So how do we start off making a web view? Well, there's 3 parts to it really. First thing is, you're going to need something to send you some JSON, which tells you what buttons you need and how to open the web view. Secondly, you'll need a HTML web page, which is the web view itself, the data, the web data that you're going to display. And thirdly, and this is where it gets a little bit more complicated, it's fine if you just want to display it. It's quite easy to just display the data. But if you then want to interact with that and bring that data back and push it back into Chatfuel, then you have to do something a little bit more difficult or just a bit more complicated with JavaScript on the client, on the web page itself, to take that data and then we're going to post it back to Chatfuel using the broadcast API. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is set up a Node.js server, and that's going to send the JSON for our buttons and it's going to render the web view itself. Okay, so as I always say, use glitch.com. It's dead easy to get a Node.js server up and running. Don't use it for production, it's not production ready. It's fine for doing these little tests, but if you're going to get hit by lots and lots of people, it's not really applicable. Right, so let's start a new project, create a new Node app. So what Glitch does is creates us a new project. This one's called Discrete Attic. It comes up with a random name. If you haven't seen any of my previous videos, these would be really helpful. If you don't understand some of the things I'm going to talk about now, go back and look at my old videos. Right, so this is our Node.js project. If we look at it live now, what it does is it renders this HTML page. Essentially, when we hit this endpoint here, let me just zoom in a little bit. When we hit this endpoint here, it displays the index.html page. If we look at the index.html page, it's this bit of HTML here and a little bit of jQuery and a bit of JavaScript, which it includes there, which is client.js. So what do we actually need? So what we're going to do is going to create an endpoint, which is going to send us the JSON for the buttons. So I'm going to create that now. So I'm going to say app.get. We're going to call that show-buttons. It's going to take a request and response. And at the moment, we won't get it to do anything. So it'll just send us some JSON, but there'll be nothing in it. Then the next thing we need, another get, we need to show the web view. So let's call that show a web view. At the moment, it's just going to respond with JSON, but what we can do is, let's just take this simple file here, response.send file. Now this is going to send a static index.html file. So if let's just do show buttons. So if we look at the URLs now, show buttons, okay, that's some JSON. And if we do show web view, that's the HTML that we had before. Okay, cool. So the last thing we need then is we're going to do app.post, and we need a post endpoint, and I'll explain why this is a little bit later, but this will be for what should we call it, broadcast to Chatfuel. So what we're going to do is we're going to take some data from a HTML form and we're going to post it back. We're going to post it back to Chatfuel using their broadcast API. At the moment, I'll just get it to render some JSON. Won't do anything. So that's our 3 endpoints. That's what we need. Okay. Now, one of the big gotchas with web views is about domain whitelisting, and this bit me today. I have to say a big thank you to Daniel Bernstein, who helped me out and showed me one of the missing things that I was missing in Chatfuel. So you have to allow both Facebook and Chatfuel to display your website. So it has to be HTTPS. That's the first thing. Glitch does that automatically for you. It gives you an SSL certificate so you can display it as HTTPS. Let's have a quick look in the settings here. So this is settings for one of my test bots. We have a quick look down here. We click on Messenger platform, and that gets us to the Messenger settings. Let's just scroll down here, and here's some old ones that I had in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in this URL. Okay. So add this to whitelist the domain and save it there. Okay. Likewise, we go to Chatfuel, and this is my Chatfuel bot. If we scroll down here, we've got domain whitelisting. So in here, again, it's my old URL. So there's a new one. We're going to put in the URL of the glitch project we've got. And then you also need to add it, and this is what I forgot, to Messenger extensions URL. And this is for, we're going to use some Messenger extensions. What we're going to do is we're going to use that to close the Webview itself. So make sure you've got both of these need to be whitelisted as well as inside Facebook itself. Right, so the first thing we need to do is look at what sort of data we need. We need to have some text, we need to have some buttons, and those buttons will be links to web views, so web URLs. So if we search in the documentation here, web URL, so what we're going to do is something like this generic template with web URLs. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to add some JSON to show the buttons. So we're going to have a generic template, which shows us 3 buttons. Here what I've done is, and this is just copied from the Chatfuel JSON. What I'll do is I'll put this somewhere online so you can just cut and paste this. What I've done is I've pulled in the user ID. When I make a request, I'm going to pass through the user ID just so we can print it out. I'm going to have 3 buttons here. Each one of these is just displaying different sizes for the web view. So we can have 3 different sizes. We can have compact, which is a small view. We can have tall, which is like the medium-sized view, or full, which is most of the screen. So the big things here for each button type are, we need a type web_URL. We need a URL to display, which I'll set up in a minute. That's my variable display URL. And then a title. So in this one, I'm just displaying the different types. So the WebView compact, WebView tall, and WebView full. You need to add messenger_extensions and set that to true. We'll explain, as I said earlier, we're going to explain later why that is. We need to use web extensions within the HTML page. The next thing is we need to set the height ratio. So these are the different heights, compact, tall, and full. So the display URL we're going to use is, and what did we call it? So we've got the, this is our URL, discreteattic.glitch.me, and we said we're going to do show web view. So this is actually going to render the HTML for us. Okay, so there we go, show web view. So now if we hit show buttons, there we go, it's going to give us something here. We've got undefined there, so when we call it, we're actually going to do user ID. And when we call it from Chatfuel, we're going to pass through the user ID. So imagine it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There you go. It's printed out there. Great. So this is the JSON that's going to get output to Chatfuel. So let's put that inside Chatfuel now. Okay, so we're going to set up a new block called show web view. This is going to show us our web view. I'm also, when we go to our AI, I'm going to set up a command just to say, so I can type in web view. So I've already done that. So it'll show this this block. One thing we're going to do is we're going to reset some attributes here. Now the reason will be clearer when I show you the HTML form in a minute. I'm going to pass these attributes back from the form in the web view, and I'm just going to reset them before we display the buttons. It depends on how this is going to work for you. Personally, it's just a quick way for me to show you this in a test. You don't need to do this necessarily. You're going to call the JSON API, and we're going to call our show buttons that we had before. So we're going to call our show buttons endpoints. So for me, that's discrete-attic.glitch.me, show buttons, and I'm going to pass through the user ID. So if we look in the dashboard here, I've done user ID, and I'm passing through the messenger user ID. Okay, so should we test it out? Right, here is my my bot. I'll type in web view. Okay, and it's brought up my web view there. Hello, user ID. That is my user ID for this page. That's unique to this application, to this bot, and that's my user ID for me. And you see here, you can see we've got the various different things here. Let's see what happens. There you go. We've displayed that web page from before. So this is great. Displays it tall, full, compact. Oh, that's odd. It's all the same. It's because we're on the web. So it doesn't matter on the web. It's not going to display these differently. So let me plug in my phone. As you can see, it's the same web views. If you click on the bottom one, the compact one, it comes sort of a third of the screen, and you can scroll up and down like this. If you click on Web View Tall, it's about sort of, I don't know, 2/3, 3/4 of the screen. Again, you can scroll up and down. Or Full, which is most of the screen. You can still see the title at the top, but it covers most of the screen. So as you can see, it does actually work on mobile. Okay, so we've displayed the buttons. So now let's display a proper web view. So we don't just want our web view here, show web view. And this is just the one that comes with the test project that Glitch creates for you. And what we're going to do is we're going to create our own. So let's duplicate this. Copy. Let's call it views, and let's call it a web view. Doesn't really matter what this is called. It's just what we're going to render as our web view. And then when we render it, we're going to render a web view rather than index.html. It just means we can put some different code in there. So let's just have a look. Is that rendering our web view? Yeah, sure, it's the same thing at the moment. So let's change this a little bit. So what do we want in our web view? Well, let's do something like a little form which does like preferences, like you would perhaps if you were setting user preferences. Okay, so let's get rid of all of this in here. Now I'm going to get rid of most of this. I'm going to leave this in here. I'm going to remove that client script there. I'm going to leave this in here, sorry. This is because this is jQuery, and we're going to use this to pull some data from our form in a minute and post it back to our server. So the first thing you need to do is you need to initialize messenger extensions. So this is a little bit of script, and this is documented on Facebook's site. We're just going to cut and paste this. So what this does is it just loads the messenger extensions into the page for us, into our client-side page. The other thing I like to do is it says welcome to Glitch there, so we set the title to be user preferences. Okay, so we've added our scripts. As always, you know what I like a nice GIF. Let's just add in a GIF here. Let's copy this in here. There we go. And hopefully now if we render it, yes, high five, we have a GIF. Okay. So let's put in a HTML form. So this is all just basic HTML. I'm not going to teach you how to do HTML. Please just look it up. Best thing to do is learn from the Mozilla documentation. I'll put a link below right now, which will tell you where to do it. I'm just going to cut and paste this because I've written this before. This is just a form with an ID on it. We need the ID because we're going to take some data from it, so we need to reference it. And I've just put a load of checkboxes in here. So what do we like? Do we like bots? Do we like music? Do we like food? And do we like ghosts? We don't like ghosts. Ghosts are scary. Okay, let's have a look at this again. So hopefully, yeah, there we go. We've got some bots and things. Oh, it's still got the CSS on from Glitch. So I'll just remove the CSS, which is up here. Yes, we'll just have it like that. Let's have a look again. There we go. So we've got various things that we can tick here, and then we can eventually submit it. So at the moment when we submit it, it doesn't do anything. So what we need to do is we need to add in some code to actually do that. Okay, so we're going to add a script. We're just going to add this at the bottom. You can load this separately, but I'll just do it like this for now. What you need to do is you need to ensure that the Facebook code that you've loaded from here, this script here, this is going to load it, but it's going to be asynchronous. That means it doesn't happen immediately. It's going to happen at some point in the future. It'll be very quick, but it will happen at some point in the future, but you can't use it until it's loaded. So what we need to do is we need to do window ext async init. So this is a function like this. So when we get in here, we can do console.log, and this is messenger extensions can't spell already. Okay, so we know when we're inside this function here that the messenger extensions which we loaded up here are ready for us to use, which is great. So let's try rendering that page. So we render it in here. We do show web view, and if we have a look at inspecting the console in Chrome, look, it says messenger extensions are ready. So we refresh the page, it loads them, and then it tells us that the Messenger extension is ready. So that means we can then do things like closing the browser window. Okay, so let's put some code in for that. So what we need to do is we need to do Messenger extensions dot request close browser, and this takes a function again, which we can call our success function. Oops. And then when we're inside here, we know that console log window will be closed. If we get in there, it's actually actually have been closed. It probably won't print that out. And then we can have a function here, which is our error function. And when this is called, so we know there's been an error. And then we can print out what that error is. Okay, which is the error that's passed through to the function. So let's have a look again. Let's reload the page. Show Webview. Okay. And because I can't spell, Messenger extension is not defined. Messenger X can't spell extensions. Messenger extensions. There we go. That should be right now. Let's try that again. Great. So there's an error. So this is a if you look at the Facebook errors, let me just get the page up now. The error that we saw there was 207.010.11. If we look at the error codes there, that means Messenger extensions are not enabled. So basically, they're not enabled for the web, which is fine. But if we look at them on mobile, which I'll show you in a minute, they are actually enabled. So that's great. Okay, so the next thing we do is we've got some code to close the browser. But we need to call it. We need to call it when we press the button. Okay, so we're going to submit the button. So at the moment, when we submit the button, it will actually post to this same URL because we've not set an action for the form. Okay, normally you'd set an action here. Okay, but in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to use jQuery and we're going to intercept that submission of the button. Okay, so we've called it preferences form there. So inside here, we know that our extensions are ready. So we're going to handle the button click. So handle button click. So let's use jQuery here. So we're going to take the preferences form. And we're going to find that on the page. And we're going to do the submit event here. Okay, so which is a function which takes an event. So when this happens, the first thing we need to do, this is when, just let me show you. This is when the submit button's pressed. Submit pressed. Okay. So at the moment, let's show it again. Show the web view. We should see in the console here, submit is pressed. And then, as you see it very briefly, submit is pressed and then it refreshes the page because it actually posts back to the page. So the first thing we need to do is to stop it doing that normal behavior to post back to the page. So what we do is we take the event which is passed through and we say event.prevent default. So that means don't submit the page. Okay, and if we show it again, show web view there, we submit it, but as you can see, it doesn't submit the page, it just does submit pressed. Great, so we've intercepted that, we've stopped it from doing its normal behavior. Okay, next thing we need to do is we need to do a post back to, do you remember we set up in our server.js, we set up broadcast to Chatfuel. So this is where we're going to intercept the data and take the data from the form. Okay, so what we're going to do is go back to our web view. We're going to take the form data. So let's take the form data first. So if we say form data equals, from our preferences form, again we use jQuery for this, if I can see properly, preferences form. So we're going to get that, and then we can do something called serialize. So that's going to take our data and put it in a format that we can put it into a URL. The next thing we do is we want a post request. So remember what we said we were going to do, jQuery.post, yeah, and we need a URL here. So what was the URL we're going to use? It's broadcast to Chatfuel. So we're going to post, to broadcast to Chatfuel. We're going to pass the form data, which we've just serialized here. And the next thing we're going to do is it needs a function. So function, oops, if I can spell again, which is going to return us some data. This is when we get the data back from whatever we've posted to. In our case, we're not actually going to return anything, so it doesn't really matter. But we're going to broadcast to Chatfuel. Right, let's have a look. So we're going to do, once we've posted to it, we're going to do messenger. Oh, in fact, I've got the code down there. We're going to take this code that we had before. We're going to put it inside there. So once we know we've posted, we can then close our browser. So that's great. This is literally all we need to do. We're going to tick our tick boxes on here. It's going to submit. When we do a submit here, it's going to prevent us submitting normally, take the data and do a post instead to our broadcast to Chatfuel endpoint. Okay, so let's see what we do here. So when we do that, we're going to get a request and we want to get the body. Okay, we want to log it and then we can see what it is. Okay, now one of the things here that we have to think about is we're posting it from a form. So in order for Express, which is the server we're using here, Express, in order for that to parse it properly, we need to use what's called a body parser. So if you go into your package.json, which is essentially you're installing a new npm package, what we need is we need to have the body parser. Now the latest version is 1.18.2, and that's the latest version of the body parser. So we go back to our server code here. And I'm going to take the body parser, let's put it in here. We're going to load up the body parser with require. And then what we need to do is we need to use the body parser. And what we want to tell it is we want key value pairs. When we look at our request.body, we want key value pairs. So we want it as a JavaScript object. So what we do is we do app.use to tell the Express app to use it, the body parser, and we want URL encoded, which is the format. When you send a form, it has a data format called x-www-form-url encoded, and this is what takes that and puts it into a nice format for us. So we say parse the data there. Oops, put two comments there. Parse the data in that format, and that means now when we get our request.body down here, it will be in the correct format for a form. So let's have a look what we can do now. So if we show our web view over here with the console there, let's have a look at our server logs. Let's load the logs. So what we should do is we should now, when we hit submit, let's take a few of these, submit, and we submitted bots and music. We've got the bots attribute, which is yes, and the music attribute, which is yes. So if we look at our web view again, make that full screen. Bots attribute is the name. We've set the value to yes when it's ticked. Music attribute is yes. Okay. So now we've got our preferences and they're posting back to our server. Okay, so what do we need to do now? We need to talk back to Chatfuel. Okay, so let's set up a few environment variables. Okay, firstly we can have our Chatfuel bot ID. Now in my second video I'll show you how you can pass these from Chatfuel in the first place, but it gets a little bit more complicated because we've got to create a template, and I didn't want to introduce templating into it, like to create a HTML page from a template until we've got the basics. So I'll show that in video number 2, but for now let's just set a hard-coded chatbot ID here. I'm going to also set what else do we need? We're going to have a Chatfuel token. Now your Chatfuel bot ID, if you go into Chatfuel, your Chatfuel bot ID is here. That's mine. And your token is in configure. And if you go down here, there's token here. I'm obviously hiding all of these so you can't see them and then send messages randomly to my bot. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use user ID. So I'm going to put these in now. I'm going to hide them from you. Okay, so I've gone back to the code. I've hidden those from you. And you should always keep those tokens and your bot ID. Your bot ID is probably okay, but keep your token safe so it means that random people can't send things to you. What we need to do is we need to take those out of our process, our environment variables, which is in something called process. So we can do const bot ID equals process.env.chatfuel bot ID. Sorry, let's just take the logs off because they're distracting. and then we can do const token, Chatfuel token, should we call it? Chatfuel token equals process.env.chatfuel token. Okay, cool. So the other things we need are, we need a user ID. And again, in my second video, I'll show you how to get the user ID. At the moment, I'm just going to use myself. You can, as you remember when we printed out the buttons here, we took the user ID because we passed it through. You can pass it into when you render the web view, but again, it's something called templating, and I didn't want to confuse the issue here. So I'm just going to use my user ID for my bot here. So user ID equals, and this is what my user ID is. I took it from the data before. And then we're going to go back to a block name. So what you have to do with the broadcast API, if you've never used it before, is you have to send it back to a block, and then you can set some user attributes. Okay, so I'm going to do a block called Webview response. So then, what do we need to do? We need some data. So we need a data format. Let me just have a look at the documentation here and just show you. It has a standard format, api.chatfuel.com/bots. Then you put in your bot ID, a user ID, send, you put in a token, you put in the block name. The block name can be the name, or it can also be the ID of the block. And then if you read the documentation, I'll post the URL below. Just have a read of the documentation yourself so you can familiarize yourself with the broadcasting API. And then you can set any number of attributes here. I'm not sure if there is a maximum that you can send. It doesn't actually say on the documentation. Maybe there's not. There is actually a maximum length that you can do for a URL, so that would probably dictate how many attributes you could set. Okay, so let's set that up now. Let's set up our query parameters. So what we're going to do is we've got our URL here, and then we've got these query parameters. So let's set the URL up first. So the URL is going to be this. Let me go to here. So this is the broadcast API URL. Okay, and we're using templated strings again. Remember those little backticks? They're not normal single quotes, they're backticks, and that allows us to put these user variables in there. So we're going to put in api.chatfuel.com/bots, the bot ID, which we've got from our environment variables, users, the user ID, which I say I've hard coded at the moment, but I'll explain in video number 2 how we do that. So that's our URL that we want. The next thing we need is we need to set up the query parameters. So there's various query parameters we need. As we've said, we need a Chatfuel token, we need a Chatfuel block ID, and then we need any number of user attributes. So we're going to use something in JavaScript now, which is it's a bit clever. It's called Object.assign. So what it takes is it takes a JavaScript object. We're going to pass through the Chatfuel token, which we've got from our environment variables. We're going to take the block name, which, as I say, I've hard coded at the moment, but I'll show you how we're going to set that within a template next time. And then we're going to append. So this is one single object there. And what this Object.assign does is it appends multiple objects together into a single object. So what we're going to do is connect request.body, and all of our variable names are going to be set. We're going to be bots attribute, music attribute, food attribute, and ghosts attribute. That's a bit tricky to say. And any values that we've got for them will be put into this single object called query. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a full URL from both this broadcast API and then all of these query parameters. Now Node has something really useful called a URL, which allows you to do sort of complex URL parsing and formatting. So let's load it at the top of the file here. Const URL equals require a URL, and that's just included with Node. You don't have to add that to your package.json file. So let's then build a URL with that. So we're going to take, what do we need to do? We need to take call it Chatfuel API URL, and we can say URL.format. Okay, and this takes an object. Format, and this takes an object. Okay, so the object has parameters here. So path name is actually the URL. So we've called it the broadcast API URL. Okay, that's going to take that, and then we can append query. It's going to append this object here, and what this does is it actually creates a URL now. So if we do console.log Chatfuel API URL, URL, that's going to actually spit out what the URL is. So let's bring up that second window I had before. Or is it there? And we'll do show the web view now. Okay, so let's tick a few of these again. I like food. I don't like ghosts. Ghosts scare me. Okay, let's put that on the side there. Let's clear those logs so we can see them. So we're going to submit that now. Now, hopefully, he says, okay, yeah, I've ticked yes to bot attributes, music attributes, and food attributes. And here it's printed out my full URL with all of the attributes on. So great, we've got a URL now. Absolutely fantastic. We can then post it. It needs a post request. If you have a look in here, post needs a post request. So what we're going to do is, if you've seen any of my previous videos, I use something called request and request promise. So we're going to add those to our dependencies in package.json. So put that in there, need a comma, and we're going to do request and request promise. We're going to use version 2.34 and 4.2.2. And you need to, if you want to know a little bit more about Node, read up about the package manager. This is just sort of standard Node practice for including new dependencies. And this is going to make our request. Okay, great. So how do we make our request? So we need to bring in a request promise. And if you've seen the previous videos, we know we do request promise equals require request promise. Great. And then what we're going to do is zoom down to the bottom and we're going to make that request itself. So we need to say request promise dot post, and we're going to have some options which I'm going to set up now. Do then, so it's a what we call a promise. It's going to return us some data. Although the Chatfuel API doesn't actually return us any data, so we don't actually need anything in there. It's a function, which then after we've done that, we can do a response.json. Now, strictly speaking, we don't need to respond with anything here. So our web view, as you can see here, it makes a post request, but we don't actually care with the data returned from it. We're not actually doing anything with that data. In some ways, if you're using client-side requests, you might be getting data from somewhere, posting data, and you might need it to return you something to update your UI or something like that. In this case, we're actually just closing this web view anyway, so it doesn't really matter what's returned. But we still need to have a response. So in this case, I'm just going to return an empty JSON block object there, like that. Okay, so what are options here? We need to set up the options. So if you remember from previous videos, we need to set up a JavaScript object like this. It needs a URI, and that's going to be our Chatfuel API URL, which we've defined up there. And the other thing we're going to need is it's going to need some headers, because Chatfuel is going to expect us to send JSON, so we have to tell it we're sending JSON. We're going to say content type application JSON. Let me double check that. I think it is, yeah, with the content type application JSON needs to be presented in this form. Okay, so that's just the expectations. We're not actually sending any JSON as such. We're just sending it as part of the URL. So it doesn't really matter, but I think that Chatfuel won't parse it properly if we don't add this header in. Okay, so what we should be able to do now is, this should all be working. Let me just bring up my other form again. I hate the way Glitch actually reloads the default page when I just want to keep it on this page. Okay, so let's do bots and music there. Oh, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up here. If we have a look at, let's have a look at what I've got here. I've set up Webview response here. So what I've done is I've set up a text block here, and it's got all of the different attributes which are going to pass back. So I'm going to set bots attribute, food attribute, music attribute, and ghost attribute. So if you remember earlier, this is why I set these to defaults, because I'm going to display these as defaults. I'm going to show the web view. The web view is then going to set them, and it's going to send a post request to this web view response as we set it in here. Where is it? Web view response. It's going to show that block, and that's going to show us the data we've posted. So let's see if this works then. Fingers crossed. Let me get up Messenger. Here we go. Here's Messenger. Now let's just load this up. So we reset up our variables. Come on then, web view. Hello. What do we want in here? Okay. I'm going to submit that. It's going to close it. We set bot attributes as yes, food attributes as yes. So let's try that again, just to prove that it does work. Click on another one of these. What do we like last time? We like ghosts. Submit ghosts. There you go. No, no, no. Yes. We've got the ghost attribute. So we've taken the data from our web view and posted it back to our bot. So let's see that work on the mobile version as well. Okay, so we'll start that up. We'll type in a web view so we can get up our web view, and that'll show our buttons like it did last time. We can click on the various different ones. This is a compact view, so it's still showing our user preferences, the new web view we've created. Let's do the tall view. Let's click on the different preferences we want: food, music, and bots. Click submit. Bang, there you go. We've got all of our attributes set from our web response: bot attributes, food attributes, and music attributes. Brilliant. Okay, so this video was rather long. Next time, I'm going to show you how to do the template side of this. That means we can make this more generic. We're going to pass the bot ID. I'm going to pass the user ID from our initial query request. I'd love it if you'd sign up for my mailing list. That's bit.ly/bot sign up. Or hit me up on Twitter @MarkLittlemore, or email me mark@marklittlemore.com, or find me on the Chatfuel community on Facebook. I'm always hanging about there answering questions. See you next time on Bot Building for Beginners.